Good afternoon and welcome to our panel on the digital transition of football and the revenue opportunities that it's generating. My name's Alex Barker and I'm the FT's global media editor. We all know what a revolution we've seen over the past decade in the way we watch, follow and engage with football, and that leap towards a digital world has only been accelerated by this pandemic. What we'll try to address today is how clubs can keep up with those trends, make them meaningful business opportunities, and what the next frontiers of technology might look like. Just to introduce our top-notch panel today, we've got Peter Hutton, who is the Director of Sports Partnerships at Facebook, where he oversees the company's sports activities. Beck Smith is an international footballer who captained New Zealand in the World Cup and won the German triple with VfL Wolfsburg. She has since moved into the sports business side and is working as a strategic consultant for Copa 90s women's football and has recently founded Crux Sports. Ramon Luarte is Chief Marketing, Commercial and Retail Officer for Sevilla FC's executive. There he is. He's been with the club since 2014 and has been steering its digital strategy. Alexandre Dreyfus is the CEO of Chiliz, a digital currency for sports and entertainment platforms that powers Socios.com, the world's first fan voting and rewards app. And Giorgio Ricci is the Chief Revenue Officer at Juventus, a club he joined some, I think, 18 years ago, where he's been in a number of roles overseeing partnership, sponsorship and marketing. If I could start with you, Giorgio, to kind of give us a brief summary of the kind of trends in how fans are consuming content and how clubs have started to respond to this in recent years.
Okay. Hi, Alex. Hi, everybody. Well, I mean, trends about consumption of football are continuing to evolve year after year, or better, I would say, month after month. Pandemic just accelerated behaviors that were still there at the beginning. To answer to your question, I think it's probably worth making a distinction by generation. So the younger generation, I think they have a completely different way of enjoying the sport content today. They want always to take the peak, only the best of the show, so they're ready to have it on demand and very easily. At the same time, I think they have a wider vision of what it means entertainment related to sport. They're extending their appetite for sport content to other kind of content, I mean, always related to sport, but without making so big differences. So what is an highlight of football video games or other real life video games, cartoons, homemade videos or skill videos or whatever, they're all part of football related content. So I'm sure that basically whoever has a kids like myself knows very well what I'm talking about. However, on the other side, the other generation, the more mature one, are anyway definitely changing their behavior and the fruition of the content. So there is for sure an increase of user who look for more than the 90 minutes of the match. So basically they're more interested in quick footage and highlights. And this is definitely, I think, no longer a trend because it's, I mean, a fact of our industry. On average today, more than 50% of the audience generated by the competition are no longer generated by the live broadcast. So this is no longer, as I said, it's no longer a trend. And then another interesting trend, I think, it's how people are then attracted and interested in having a look into the behind the scene and the daily life of the star and of the club in general. Especially now, of course, that people are no longer allowed to enter into the stadium, it's hugely increasing the demand for those kind of content. So basically, in a nutshell, I think we can summarize, people are looking for a specific human touch to be more inclusive within I mean, the behind the scene and what's the properties they like. And this is, I think, a great opportunities for us and for us as football club, of course, to deliver always differentiated and customized content.
Thanks. And if I can just go to Bex, and do you these kind of trends can move very fast, and how well do you think clubs have done to kind of keep up with this so far, and where are the big gaps, do you think?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, especially during this time of COVID, oh, hello everyone, thank you for having me, by the way, is that the ones that do move quickly, as you mentioned, Alex, are the ones that are keeping ahead. And I think one of the biggest gaps, I mean, we can talk about, Giorgio, really interesting talking about some of the trends and whether it's people watching on Zoom now or the memes and the GIFs. But I think the biggest gap for me still in football is the lack of inclusion of 50% of the population. So reason number one, I got into media, storytelling, working with brands, is that it's not just a CSR campaign. It's not just because we should. It's not an equality topic. There's actually a huge untapped market there. And I think that's still the biggest gap. I mean, Copa 90 did a modern fan report, our second one. And what we found was that fans were being starved of regular women's football content. It doesn't pop up on radars enough. And the type of content and the marketing that's being created in football is very much directed at and men, not surprisingly, because most of it's made by boys and men. So you have the familiarity bias coming in there. But when we surveyed, we found that 58% of fans were saying that actually football clubs are the place and the space who have the power to create a positive change that they want to see. So there's a movement happening. Juventus is certainly one of those clubs that's on the forefront of it, showing both their men's and women's on digital platforms, being smart about how they're integrating men and women together. And the quality of the sport has certainly caught up. And, if you watch Caroline Weir's goal last weekend from Man City, you can't deny the fact that these highlights are just as interesting and spectacular to watch as the men's. But that for me is the biggest gap right now in football and the biggest opportunity.
Yeah. Ramon, do you think Bex's assessment's fair there? I mean, where would you like to see the kind of investment and effort kind of focused in next coming years? Ramon? I think you're on mute.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I can listen to you. Apologize. Yeah, well, it's a very nice. Happy to be here and join this panel together with this extraordinary professional team and competitive team. Yeah, as you said, I mean, I'm totally agree with what have been said so far here. I think there's the football has been experienced privilege in the last 20 years, transforming the industry and the last 90s. And now there's another risk on keeping the attention of those new generations that are not attending this game for 90 minutes and neither 24/7, especially. And as media, it's fully fragmented, and there are more content than ever, and it will be more content in the coming years, raised and generated by users, by players. I think there's a huge opportunity as well as a risk to keep this privileged position that we have had in the past and keep this football industry as an entertainment industry, because nowadays there are a lot of content that are competing against us all on media landscape. There are content everywhere, there are multi-fragmented media, and now everyone can access their content at any time, at any moment, at their hands with mobile phones. So I think it's really important. At least it has been really important for Sevilla FC in our current transformation stage to put a lot of effort in gathering data in order to create to have that information and to turn that information into our knowledge and help us to take better decisions in the near future. And probably better decision doesn't mean to create the same content everywhere and despite of the platform. that information will enable us to start creating or having discussions with all the players that are really, really important in this industry, new players that are racing, new players that are doing a great job, and probably with all the entertainment content that might be aligned with the content that our players are distributing globally. So as well as everyone said that COVID has created a transform and put us in a very risky moments, because of the revenue that we're generating on a match day has been dramatically affected, probably broadcasting as well and commercially at the same time. But we need to look further, to look ahead, and try to understand that in 10, 15 years time from now, everything will be absolutely different from now at this moment. And it's not a matter to keep 90 minutes of attention in our stadiums. It's more about how to create this appealing and engaging content, and to create this targeting different content for different targets at the same time. And it's really, really complex, because content can be created for, you need a lot of resources. I mean, if you have 50 people creating content inside your clubs, it will be enough. Well, maybe not. Maybe with 100, maybe you would need 100, and maybe you need an external agency that create specific content for the Asian market, totally different from the content that you're creating for the US market or the Latin American market as well. So it's really complex, challenging moment, an inspiring moment, and everything started to turn more digital, more big data, more data and analysis, and building an ecosystem that everyone can have a word on this.
And Peter, I mean, Ramon laid out some of the dilemmas and resources and the kind of questions that clubs are facing in engaging. I mean, what are the do's and don'ts you found on Facebook in terms of what the best practices in terms of engaging with fans are by clubs?
I think the most important best practice is to come with a clear mindset of saying, this is what I want to achieve, and therefore coming to a route of how you achieve it. And start with the principle of, I want to be where my fans are consuming content. I want to be where my future fans are consuming content. And that opens you up to all sorts of different experiences, but particularly the idea of a fan being active and not passive. The idea of a fan being engaged in your content and therefore caring more about what you do as a brand. I think you have to start with the principle of, I want to embrace that sense of community that sport can really engender and bring people together. And I think in terms of one thing as a real sort of key moment, unlock the power of your best assets, and your best assets are your players. Use them to make authentic posts that really reveal themselves as characters. I'd use the example of Liverpool and what they've done with Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson. They've got a series of content elements on Instagram, which has been brilliant, because you really get to know them as people. You care about more them as individuals. It brings people in. It develops that sense of fandom. So I'd use Liverpool as a great example of that. But fundamentally, use your assets, be clear about what you want to achieve, and try and make your fans actively part of what you're doing, as opposed to just passive viewing.
And that's a very good segue to ask Alexandre to explain what fan tokens are, and where has that cut through with fans? What kind of engagement tools have been tried that might not have been as kind of accepted? I mean, what's the kind of experimentation going on at the moment in this area?
It's actually it's $1 million question. What is a fan token? Because most of the sports industry doesn't yet know what we are doing, which is interesting. So just to rebound first on the question, because we're talking a lot about content, and the reality is, at least at socials.com, we believe that monetization, which is the question, is not just about content. It's the monetization of the fan and the club. And what does a fan want? He wants to be recognized. He wants to be part of a community. He wants to be engaged. But engage is not just about content. And especially content is not scalable. as Ramon was saying, if you have to have 100 people to actually create content and distribute it, it's never going to be break-even. You will never make money. So what we went on, it's a very weird, naive, and crazy journey, is we inspired ourselves from the socios of Real Madrid and Barcelona and socios in general in Spanish, where we created this digital asset that we call fan token. And Juventus was one of the first of our partner. And we created a platform where you and I can buy these tokens. And by owning this token, this is my token, this is digital, this is in my mobile app. And as long as I own that, I can be recognized as a super fan 2.0, whatever you want to call it. And you can participate in some decision of the club. Like, for example, in the case of Juventus last year, exactly 1 year ago, they asked their fans, what music do you want to have in the stadium? Because for the last 8 years, it was the same music every time they were scoring. So for the first time, they asked their fans, which music do you want to have? And they only asked the fans who had fan tokens, so who had a vested interest. And they chose whatever music. Thanks to Ronaldo, they scored 3 times. So the same day during the stadium, the fans heard that music. But it was not just in the stadium, because in the TV you hear that music, in EA Sports or in whatever economy, in the games, they have this music as well. So my point is, what we're trying to achieve now is creating an ecosystem where for now we have like 20 teams, Barca, Juve, PSG, Milan, Turkish team, and many more. And in 2020, we generated $34 million revenue, which is the proceed of these fan tokens that we eventually share with the clubs. And this year, we're going to generate between $50 to $60 million. So the clubs that actually took the risk to work with us, like Juventus, are the first one to be rewarded, because when now there is this very sad situation, of course, of pandemic, the ones that are the most innovative in terms of digital monetization of their fans are the ones that are the first rewarded through that. And that's what we are pushing, is creating this ecosystem where we believe that, I would say something weird, that clubs don't own their fan. Therefore, it's very difficult for them to reach 100% of them. And what we are trying to achieve with socios and the fan tokens is just one single piece of trying to engage with a population that is more digital, more geeky, more global, definitely not Western Europe. It's an Asian play, it's a Turkish play, it's emerging, and that's what we are doing.
Giorgio, has the music improved?
Yes, of course. Yeah. No, what I said was, one of the very first experiments related to the platform, Socios. I would say a really successful one. Was one of the first activities we really implemented in order to let the fan feeling, to be really involved within some even decision within the daily club life. So it was really interesting activities, and we are going ahead, by the way. So we're periodically implementing other contests or involving them in other activities and whatever. So interesting and successful.
And I'm just going to ask Bex again and pick up on some of the points you were making about the women's game. And it's had to, by dint of being so in the shadow of the men's game for such a long time, it's had to innovate a lot in digital terms. And is there much we can draw from the experience of the women's games online that actually can have broader lessons for the game?
Yeah, this topic is super interesting for me. Obviously I'm biased having come through the game, but the constant sort of conversation about the value of the women's game and where it's come. And if you look at the history of it and go back far, find the ancient Olympics, women were not allowed to participate. So when you look at sort of from the very starting blocks, women have always started behind, and that's why these structures were not built for women. They weren't allowed to participate. In some cases were banned from it for 50 years, for example, in England. So they're decades behind in many ways, but actually, when you look at where the money has gone, it's always gone into men's sports, and the visibility was a big part of, where the funding has come from, the broadcast money. And so what the women's game has always had to do was try to find visibility elsewhere. And it was mostly found in that digital space. And so it's a very comfortable place. And Peter, the communities. And I think because it has been sort of excluded from the traditional ways of watching football, it has sort of built itself up through these communities and digital spaces, which are a lot more private. They're a lot more engaging, as we've now seen, in different sports and in the men's game as well. And there's a lot of really interesting examples of that. I mean, when Man City joined their social platforms in 2018 with their same goals, there were synergies that they used with the men's, and Peter also mentioned that the male athletes and being able to be seen next to Aguero or a Vincent Kompany at the time really actually ended up meaning that they could recruit some of the top players now. 3 years later, you have Sam Mewis from the US national team, Rose Lavelle, Carly Lloyd had come over. And I think that in a sort of knock-on effect way has had a lot of impact for the revenue of Man City. And you look at NWSL, what they've done with their new deal with Twitch and CBS. So CBS is their, linear TV broadcaster, but then Twitch is a completely different place of gaming and engagement that's outside of the US and Canada. And that's a completely different way of looking at how you get visibility of the sport out. Atalanta Media, completely breaking the mold of media, buying TV rights for the top 5 leagues in the world, redistributing them in the other 5 countries, keep retaining the commercial rights. Just really interesting models that are coming out of the women's game that I think, other sports, men's sports can also learn from. And if you're looking for brands to invest, they're looking for that value-based proposition. And that's where, women's football has always had a very strong value-based or values, where the sport's been based on inclusivity, equity, diversity. And therefore, I think it becomes a really, really safe place to invest, especially digitally right now.
Yeah. And Peter, I'm going to ask you across the high and low of this. So that, in terms of monetization, you've got some of the examples that Bex was using of owned and operated channels, like quite sophisticated media operations within clubs themselves that aren't within, social media wall gardens like Facebook, and the other end of clubs that are kind of earlier stage of this journey. I mean, what could you talk about both of those ends of the scale and what we might draw in terms of lessons for monetization?
I think, this is a very dangerous question, Alex, because I could talk for hours about this. But I think the first thing I'd say is there's all these different tools out there now to serve your needs at different ends of that spectrum. And some of those things are really well established and developing significant money. Branded content is an obvious example that I'd go to, because branded content and sport in social media is a really top fit. You've got the glamour of the sports IP. You've got the need to target audience that a sponsor has. The two go together really well. There's a brilliant case study with Manchester City and Etihad recently and how they uplifted their brand. You've got things like the shopping, which is now more and more sort of becoming part of normal business for the sports brands. You'd use an example like Gareth Bale when he went to Tottenham. And Tottenham announced his shirt number with an Instagram reel. They tagged that so you could instantly shop and buy the shirt with the number on it. Perfect example of using social media to drive revenue. You've got things like the paid online events or user pay, where particularly for those people who don't have TV deals, and there seems increasingly large amounts of brands that don't have TV deals now, paid TV deals, you can now monetize your content directly by creating effectively a pay-per-view model, but based on having a community of fans that you're targeting that to. You've got the ad share from advertising on platform, both YouTube and Facebook getting increasing numbers on that. Juve actually a great example. They've got the in-stream ads, they do the branded content with Jeep, they use Instagram shopping. So there's different forms of monetization all coming together. And I think the big thing I'd say there is whether you're a small sports franchise or whether you're a big club, this is a revenue line that's going up and up. and you look at your other revenue lines and they're often stagnating or going down. So you can see how the digital income is going to be an increasing part of your future.
I'm just going to quickly ask Ramon to pick up on some of the things that Peter was saying. Actually, do you think, is there a dilemma for clubs in terms of driving traffic to your own sites and operations versus using platforms like social media platforms like Facebook to try and monetize?
Yeah, definitely. It's a win-win relationship. It has to be a win-win relationship where partly the information that each platform, social media platform, needs, the content that the club, as well as the rest of the players, are creating and generating into the social media. And of course, clubs needs that data, some part of the data that they are gathering from that content, interactions, engagement rates, and the more information, the better, because then clubs will start pushing more their players, which are the kings of the content in terms of creation, and to create more appealing content, and that will create some benefits from social media. The problem here is how to manage, how to gather and to put the same data that you're collecting from different social media into one single platform. And I think that's the question, and it's something that we did in the last year and a half at CVFC, just creating a business intelligence center. Just in one single platform, we try to integrate, and we are integrating all touch points, all the relationships that we have with our fans. And it doesn't matter if the fans are season ticket holders, very, very close fans, they live in Seville, very close to the stadium, or they are living in Ciudad de Mexico and they're fans of CVFC, but they never been in Seville at any time. It doesn't matter, but it's just to put that relationship, that content, that user, that information into one single platform, both physically and digitally, in order to track them and to contact and to activate that database. And as you said, Alex, yeah, it's key. It's really, really important to get as much more information as possible from social media platforms, because if they are close and they don't want to share the information with the clubs, it's not good for anyone, right? It will be good for them in a shorter period, but probably not good for in 5 years' time from now. And secondly, data and analysis will enable us to start discussing and creating a partnership with each of them to create. Now we're seeing some examples with esports, right? So some of the top clubs are having an esport game. They are playing FIFA, they are playing Fortnite, they are having some visibility in League of Legends, you name it. But the problem here is that, okay, we will create that content for free. I mean, we will spend a lot of money from our own resources as well as external resources as agencies specialized in that content, and we will do it for free. I don't think that's the rule. I mean, we will create that. We may be able to create that content, but at the same time, try to build a partnership with these social media platforms in order to okay, what will be the benefit from that? Because I don't want to have only the interaction. I mean, it's important. The interaction is important because that will create products and services and enough information to create something that can be monetized. Alex said it before. We are here to help our clubs in driving and increase the revenue that we are getting from our fans, especially nowadays. And digital is part of it. That the problem on digital is that everyone creates platforms, and maybe you don't take enough of that revenue directly to the club.
Yeah. And Peter, do you want to quickly respond to the issue of kind of data sharing and how to build those kind of partnerships?
I mean, obviously we're severely regulated in terms of what data we can share, but I think where we really take pleasure in the relationship with clubs is often we're driving people to their owned and operated sites as well. You know, I see this as a genuine win-win situation. It's great now that we have more monetization tools, so that there's a clear revenue line coming out of your social media presence. But it's also great that we can help drive people to the best of the owned and operated sites as well. So I see us being part of that value chain on both sides.
Great, and I mean, just as we're on the data issue, Giorgio, could you talk about the kind of challenges you've got at Juventus and how you think about building that kind of understanding of your fan base and relating that to products and services? What's the kind of experience you've had?
Yeah, I would say, of course, the ability to disintermediate the relationship with the audience is one of the most important topics in general. So basically, for each company of the entertainment industry, we are all trying to address this topic. This is, I think, even more important for the football clubs that traditionally struggle to own massive audience and customer data. So, in my view, the most important thing is to start from the base. And so football clubs should be able to deeply analyze the macro data. So starting from the basic, from the demographic, age of fans, geographies, and whatever, in order to constantly adapt and address the content strategy. On the other end, we have here some, executive of some very important platform. I would also add that it's really important also to adapt your content strategy according to the third-party platform, because insights and peculiarity change very quickly, and it's really important to be flexible in order to provide the fan always with appealing contents. We as a club, along with the implementation of our new digital ecosystem, we introduced several backend solutions in order to enhance our capabilities in this long run of generating insights and analytics. So centralized data hub or recommendation engine, unique identity manager, or some of the tools that we are currently implementing, with the ultimate goal of simplifying the relationship and enhancing the conversion process. So that's important, to create this funnel where the fan can consume the content, buy the shirt, or buy additional content, and in general to being able to monetize the presence of your fan thanks to the content that you're generating within your environment. And then, of course, as we shared previously, it's really important to let them feel part and being able to interact within their idol, within the club, and whatever. So I think there are today so multiple opportunities to do so involving them within video games or behind the scene content, video chat, or whatever, so contest, as Alex said before, and whatever. They're all example of opportunities in order to make them engage and trying to go beyond the pure football.
So, Alexandre, if you could tell us a bit about kind of the promise and potential of blockchain in this area, because is that something that can really, does have potential to improve that relationship between clubs and fans, and also, isn't there a bit of a danger that clubs will be trying to run before they can walk in this?
No, so blockchain is a technology, and it's for most of people it's not understood, and so it's always a bit scary when you say that word. Now the reality is the basic of the sports industry is about scarcity. Everything that we do in the sports industry is exclusive content, exclusive celebrities. There is only 50,000 tickets. There is only certain amount of jersey that are signed by the players. Everything is about scarcity, and blockchain is a way to create a digital scarcity of something. The question is, what is this something? In our case, we created this fan token that we call a bit like, instead of a share of a company, it's a share of influence. And we digitalize this share of influence to give this recognition and this power, so-called, to the fans. Now, these fans are very fragmented. The first question that I always like to ask is, what is a fan? In 2021, what is a fan? There is so many tribes of all these people that are like super hardcore fans that are in the stadium, that have a tattoo of the clubs, that we as a company, we will never target because they are not our audience. And there is the fluid fan, the fans that are more casual, that consume different clubs, that are not exclusive to one club. And that's the ones we are looking at. And I'm going to use a bad word. I'm going to use the word customer, because the question is, how can you try to make these audience or these fans or these people who have an affinity with these brands customers? And we go back to the question about what can you sell them? In our case, we don't sell content. That's the job of the clubs. That's the job of platforms, social media. That's not our business. Our business is to try to find a niche that is creating this digital asset that is scalable, that is global, and that give to this young generation, people that are already educated. There is more than 100 million people right now that are, let's say, crypto enthusiasts, and there is 500 million people that plays video games and understand what is a virtual currency, not as a crypto, but as a virtual currency with Fortnite and everything else. And all this audience, we just take the best brand in the world, Barca, Juve, PSG, etc., and we create something that fit to their mind, and we give value to them through that, and that become a revenue for the clubs. And there is no danger here. There is just an education. I've been lucky enough to be in the internet space since 1995, and the question I have today from either media or clubs or third party about blockchain is the same that I had in 1995 about what is a modem and what is an email. And yet here we are today. So at this point, it's whether you adapt or you die, and you have an audience or a global audience that is ready to consume, but there is not enough offer, and we are just one of this offer.
I'm now we're running through time faster than I expected, so I'm going to quickly ask Bex and Peter to separately kind of talk about, new digital technologies that might be kind of weaved into the businesses of football in coming years. And Bex first, could you?
Yeah, I think if we look at digitalization more broadly, one of the most interesting areas I've seen recently is AI, and the use of AI for specifically injury reduction. So Zone 7 is a company that's recently come on my radar, and looking at the cost that it is to a club when you have a multi-million-dollar player sitting on the bench. So the investment into AI to look to use the algorithms to try to avoid those injuries, to try to recommend different training programs, to try to keep players on the pitch, I think is not only really beneficial and cost saving for clubs in the long run, but also what it does is it allows players to have more responsibility over their own bodies, their own lives, their own careers, which in the end also is only better for their own mental health, probably gives them more longevity in careers as well. So looking at sort of, digitalization and costs in football from a different standpoint, I think the AI and injury prevention is a super interesting one.
Fantastic. And Peter?
Good. I'll take the opposite route, though. Tal from Zone 7 is my neighbour here, so a big call out to him as well. But I think for me, if you think about fans and consumption, I think the question has changed. Now you shouldn't be saying, what do my fans want to watch? You should be saying, what do my fans want to do? You want to be giving them tools that allow them to be engaged in the content. That means watching and consuming in a completely different way. I watched the Premier League game the other week in an Oculus VR headset, and I loved it because I felt I was there at the stadium. I had avatars of my friends with me. I could get different views. I could call up stats all on one screen. That was a much better way for me of consuming the game because I was actively involved. We've been streaming a lot of stuff live, and we find that people stay 55% longer if they're engaged in the content by commenting, by voting, by being part of the content, not just receiving the content. So for me, that's the most important direction of travel. is to give fans things to do and not just things to watch.
Ramon and Giorgio, I mean, what kind of can you address some of the technology you were talking about and other in-shirt cameras and things like this? I mean, how exciting and interesting is it to clubs these days, and what's the kind of promise there?
From our side, from Sevilla FC, I think it's pretty much what had been said. All the colleagues have been said. Probably on the sports side, taking care of our players is critical at this moment because there are more games than ever. When a club is competing in Champions League, in their domestic leagues, as well as the other leagues, 3 leagues at the same time, and they're playing after 3 days in consecutive. It's really hard to keep that physically to keep themselves safe, safe. So predicting injuries, predicting and keeping them safe. It's probably one of the the pillars of our scouting platform with IE technology, just enable and providing full information on what players should be high in terms of transfer market, in which time it's the best moment to buy and sell players in order to get revenue from that. And it's pretty much a very innovative way and program and technology that we are using at this time.
And Giorgio?
Yeah, I mean, innovation it's vital. I'm expecting a lot in the next few years in terms of technologies that will be able to enable new way of fruition of the content. It will be vital, I mean, for rights holder, for sport properties, and for everyone in general. On top of the immersive content, on which I completely share and on which I think that many, step ahead will be, it's possible, they will be making over the next few years. I do personally believe in the growing fusion between what is real and what is gaming. So basically, I see the entertainment of the real experience, so the matches, mixed with the interaction typical of the gaming tool. So I do see a lot of potential into that. So basically, gaming tool that will allow a more, interactive and immersive experience. I understand, of course, it's not easy to be translated into a single specific idea or concept, but I think this is the key direction for the future in terms of innovation.
Fantastic. Look, we've got about 5-10 minutes left, and I'd love to call the audience to send in some more questions. We've actually got quite a few, and so be ready, panelists, because I'm going to throw these at you in a merciless way. I think I'm going to start with, as players trying to gain more followers on their personal accounts, do clubs consider the commercial presence of a player when heading into the transfer market? Is that a consideration? Ramon?
I do believe that probably in the future, on those agreements between the club and the players, social media, their content that they're generating, and their individual rights will mean a lot in the coming years. And definitely it will be extremely considered with a very big importance when buying and selling players, probably in the near future. I'm totally agree with that.
And Bex, I mean, do you think that players, as a former player yourself, do you think that the players realise, my son has thankfully walked in, the kind of value that their own social media presence might bring to their careers and things like that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Peter touched on it before as well. Actually, most of these guys have, which is the importance of the player sort of at the center of the storytelling. And in the women's game, because female players have always been a part of the community, they haven't sort of been separated out from the community. Here's the fans, here's the players. They've really been sort of drivers of the community, and even on their own social media platforms, they'll they'll promote ticket sales. They'll say, come to the games. And I do think that actually when you have that are much more commercially savvy, that are much more in the media, that are much more open to sort of be a part of that marketing campaign, the clubs do take advantage of that. They do look at that, and they certainly want players that are not just good players, but good people and also marketable, because every bit kind of helps, I think, in the women's game right now where it is in its growth.
We've got a question here that it's quite a big one for all of you, but have any of the panel thought that it's possible to set up a social media platform that focuses on football that isn't reliant on Facebook? Alexandre, do you think it would be possible? Is there a space for football only social media?
I mean, I don't think so. That's not. I don't believe that there is. There was many companies in the last 10 years, and I've seen startup deck, I've seen VC investment around that. I haven't seen a single startup succeeding trying to do that, because at the end, you're not just a football fan. You also like a bit Formula One, a bit tennis, a bit something else. So that's why you have Facebook and Instagram. It's because everything is on the same platform, and I have my friends and every sport at the same time. I'm just consuming it differently, depends on the platform. But having dedicated social media per sports, till now, it always failed.
I'm not going to ask Peter the same question because I suspect I might know the answer.
But just in case someone gives me some private equity money. I think the biggest advantage we have, clearly there's 700 million sports fans who follow a sports page on Facebook. There's 400 million plus follow sports pages on Instagram. That's a fantastic asset to bring to the sports industry. But again, I go back to what Bex has talked about a lot. It's that power of community. If you can build community around a brand and an area of interest, then you've got something of value. And whether that be done on a small scale or a big scale, that community element of social media is what's really important.
Yeah, I mean, Giorgio, is there not? I mean, for all clubs, this tension between revenue generation through traditional broadcast rights and the potential there is through digital channels and the constraints that are placed on you because of how you're monetizing the main rights.
But basically, I mean, at the end, the answer is not easy, of course, but you need to find the right balance between, of course, the different source of monetization. Of course, media rights are still representing the highest, profit source of revenues for club. But I mean, the club, they have to be clever in order to fill the spaces in which they can, with other rights and other kind of content and monetization activity to fill the gaps. And of course, a part of the other big stream of revenues like sponsorship and stadia and whatever. I think that the fact that there is this huge disruption in, fruition of the content by the new generation. It, of course, representing a huge opportunity for rights holder in order to implement new source of revenue. Of course, basically everything currently is moving on digital. So even the traditional source of revenue nowadays are mostly generated through digital channels. So if you think about ticket sales that are basically around 100% sold on digital, or the e-commerce that, especially in this current period of pandemic, is basically replacing more than 85-90% of the physical sales of the store. So we have to define what's a natural shifting of traditional revenues on the digital environment, and then on the other hand, all the new opportunity that this huge disruption is generating.
I'm going to ask all of you very, very briefly to answer this one, which is, and starting with Bex, for female inclusion and especially women's football, what's one specific action that could be taken to promote women's football in the best way possible? All of you, just like one point that you'd want to make on that. Bex.
I kind of wanted to go last to see what they say, but okay.
Oh, right. Well, go last. Let's go last.
No. Yeah, okay. I'll go last. I want to hear what they say.
You go last. Okay, Peter.
I'm more interested in what they say. Yeah.
I'm happy to jump out and go first. I'd say, don't hide your assets behind paywalls. Look at gaming, look at music, see how they've built monetization models that are different models, free-to-air models that then have microtransactions that then build up other ways of raising revenue. That's what women's football has the opportunity to do because it's not tied into pay TV.
Alexandre?
I don't have a point of view because I'm not a football expert. I'm more a tech guy, so I don't have any valuable insight on how to improve this equality, unfortunately.
Okay, Ramon.
It's really, really complicated to answer to this question because nowadays it's a very complex and sensitive issue. I do think that it's a matter of time, promotion, and then new generations, as we are seeing now, are consuming that female sports, female football, and it will be just a matter of time. I think it's a generational problem rather than a big opportunity for media, big opportunity for sponsors, brands, as well as for fans. But depending on which country you ask this, you will notice differences between the north and the south, between Europe and Latin America and the US. And I think it's just part of the social issue rather than any other thing. I mean, I think that there are plenty of players that are involved on this industry that are pushing nicely in order to make a more balanced situation between male and female football.
Giorgio.
I think leveraging the power of the stories and the content that you can create around, because having our direct experience into women's football with our team we launched some years ago, our perception is that we are enabled now to tell some amazing stories, pretty unique, regarding our industry on a completely different angle, with the power of attracting a wider audience. And so I think it's really interesting because there are so many unique stories behind women's football that can definitely be seen, and they really represent definitely an added value in order to make the content generation and everything else, of course, more round and more contemporary.
And finally, Bex, and actually I'm going to mix this with the last question. It's going to be the last response. But there's always a lot of talk about content from clubs at events like this. But why, when we look at club websites, is so much of the content so similar and rather generic and, to be honest, a bit boring? Now, Bex, you've done a lot of content, and so I'd like you to answer both questions as a final thing.
I like that question. I'm glad that you asked it. First, I think they answered the question better than I could have, actually, about how to use the synergies, how to build the women's game. So it's really fascinating, interesting to hear, both from such a huge platform like Facebook and massive clubs like Sevilla and Juventus. 100% agree. I think the number one thing that women's football needs is just investment. It needs the decision makers at all the platforms, at all the clubs, to really take proper investment and look into what are those differences in the women's game, what are the nuances that we can actually invest in, because they are different, as Ramon was saying. And we can utilize those, we can capitalize on them. And the reason why I think of the content is boring is because there's not a lot of diversity in the types of people who are creating those content. There needs to be more females, there needs to be more Black people, there needs to be just people from different countries and perspectives more involved in the types of creation of content, because you're going to be able to tap into an audience that is more like the people creating that content. And I having worked a little bit in the media industry in the last 3 years, I find that it is quite homogeneous in terms of the types of people that are in it. So more diversity.
Good answer. We're well over our time, so I'm gonna thank you all very briefly. It's been a great session, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk us through this, and I hope you can come back at some future summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your audience.
Bye.